David sat alone in his small house, sipping a cup of hot coffee. The night outside was quiet, the wind whispering through the trees. He had lived alone for years, enjoying the peace and silence. But tonight, something felt different. Something was coming. A sharp knock on the door broke the stillness. David frowned. It was late, too late for visitors. He placed his cup on the table and walked to the door, hesitating for a moment before opening it. Standing outside, illuminated by the porch light, was a woman, or at least she looked like one at first glance. She was tall, her silver skin shimmering slightly under the dim light. Her eyes glowed faintly, like stars in the night sky. She wore a long, dark cloak, and her expression was tense, as if she had been running from something. David blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. "Please," the woman said, her voice smooth yet urgent. "Let me in." David hesitated. Everything about this was strange. A part of him wanted to slam the door shut and pretend it never happened. But something in her voice, a quiet desperation, made him pause. "Who are you?" he asked. "There is no time," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "They are coming." David looked past her into the darkness, but he saw nothing. Just the quiet street and the trees swaying in the wind. "Who's coming?" he asked, his voice lower now. She took a shaky breath. "Enemies. Dangerous ones. If they find me, they will not stop until I am gone." David felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't sure if he believed her, but something about her fear was real. She wasn't acting. "Why my house?" he asked. She met his gaze. "Because you are human." David had no idea what that meant, but the way she said it made him feel as if it was the most important thing in the world. The wind howled outside. He could feel the night pressing in, heavy and full of unseen eyes. Against all logic, he stepped aside. "Come in." The woman didn't wait. She slipped inside, moving gracefully but quickly. As soon as she was inside, she turned and touched the door. A faint glow spread across the wood for a second before fading. "What did you do?" David asked, closing the door. "Locked it," she said. "Their technology cannot break through my seal. For now, we are safe." David crossed his arms. "All right. Now tell me what's going on." The woman pulled back her hood, revealing smooth silver hair that shimmered like liquid metal. She studied him for a moment before speaking. "My name is Vena," she said. "I come from far beyond this world. I was part of a group studying different species across the galaxy." David raised an eyebrow. "Like scientists?" "In a way," she nodded. "But not everyone in the universe values knowledge. Some only seek control. The ones chasing me are part of a powerful faction. They do not tolerate those who challenge their rule." David exhaled slowly. "And you challenged them?" She nodded. "I discovered something about humanity. Something they don't want anyone to know." David's heart pounded. "And what is that?" Vena hesitated before answering. "That your kind is more powerful than you realize." David had no idea what she meant, but before he could ask, something outside made his stomach twist. A low, humming sound filled the air. Not loud, but deep, like the vibration of something massive moving just beyond sight. The ground seemed to tremble for a moment, and the lights in the house flickered. Vena's eyes darkened. "They're here." David clenched his fists. He didn't understand what was happening, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a dream or a trick. Something dangerous had followed her here. And now, he was part of it. David's heart pounded as the strange humming sound filled the night air. The floor beneath his feet vibrated slightly, as if something unseen was moving outside. He turned to Vena, who stood perfectly still, her glowing eyes focused on the door. "Who are they?" David whispered. "They are hunters," Vena said softly. "They don't ask questions. They don't negotiate. They only take what they are ordered to take." David swallowed hard. "And they're here for you." Vena nodded. "And if they think you are helping me, they won't spare you either." David glanced around his small home. It wasn't much. A simple living room, a kitchen, a couple of bedrooms. But it was his. The thought of dangerous aliens storming in, tearing it apart, made his stomach twist. "I should call the police," he said, reaching for his phone. Vena caught his wrist before he could dial. Her grip was strong, but not painful. "No human force can stop them," she said. "If they come inside, this house will be destroyed before help can arrive." David exhaled sharply. "So what do we do?" Vena let go of his wrist and stepped closer. "You must let me stay. If I remain hidden, they may not attack right away. But I need your protection." David narrowed his eyes. "Why should I risk my life for you? I don't even know you." Vena looked at him for a long moment, then spoke in a quiet voice. "Because I can give you something in return. Anything you desire." David stared at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I am not just an ordinary fugitive," she said. "I carry knowledge that no human has ever had before. I can give you technology beyond anything your kind has created. I can show you secrets of the universe." David frowned. "And all you want is to hide in my house?" "Yes," Vena said simply. "At least until I find a way to escape this planet safely." David hesitated. This was insane. A few minutes ago, he had been drinking coffee, enjoying the quiet night. Now he was talking to an alien woman who was offering him anything just to stay hidden. He looked at her glowing eyes, at the way her silver skin reflected the dim light. She didn't seem like a threat. If anything, she looked tired, like someone who had been running for too long. Outside, the humming sound grew fainter, but the tension in the air remained. David didn't know what these hunters were capable of, but he knew one thing. If they could track her this far, they weren't going to give up easily. He sighed. "All right, you can stay." A flicker of relief passed through Vena's face, but she quickly hid it. "Thank you," she said. "I promise you won't regret this." David shook his head. "I already do." She gave him a small smile, then moved towards the window. Carefully, she peeked through the blinds. "They are searching," she said. "They don't know exactly where I am, but they can sense my presence." David rubbed his temples. "Great. So how do we stop them from finding this place?" Vena turned to him. "I can shield your home. It won't make us completely invisible, but it will slow them down. If they can't track me easily, they may give up and leave." David crossed his arms. "And how do you do that?" Vena raised her hand. A soft blue glow pulsed from her fingertips. "With this." David took a step back. "Is that magic?" Vena smiled slightly. "No, it's science. But to you, it may look the same." Before he could argue, she walked towards the center of the room and pressed her palm against the wooden floor. A faint shimmering wave spread outward, covering the walls and ceiling. The air seemed to hum for a second. Then everything returned to normal. "It is done," she said, standing up. David looked around. "I don't see any difference." "You're not supposed to," Vena said, "but the hunters will." David sat down on the couch, rubbing his hands over his face. "This is crazy." Vena sat across from him. "I know," she said, "but it is real." He looked at her again, this strange woman from another world, hiding in his home. He didn't know what he had just gotten himself into, but one thing was certain: his quiet life was over, and the night was far from finished. David sat on the couch, his mind racing. Less than an hour ago, his life had been normal. Now, there was an alien woman hiding in his house, and dangerous hunters were searching for her. He rubbed his face and exhaled slowly. "This doesn't make any sense," he muttered. Vena, sitting across from him, tilted her head. "What part?" David gave her a tired look. "All of it." Before she could respond, a new sound made both of them freeze. A low, mechanical hum came from outside. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a car. It was something else, something unnatural. David stood up and walked cautiously to the window, careful not to move the blinds too much. His breath caught in his throat. A black vehicle was parked across the street. It looked like an ordinary van, but something about it felt wrong. The windows were too dark. The shape was too smooth, like it wasn't built by human hands. "They're here," Vena whispered. David turned to her. "Are you sure?" Vena nodded. "They don't need weapons to be dangerous. Their presence alone can be enough." David's hands curled into fists. "What do they want?" "To take me," she said, "and to make sure no one knows why." David felt a shiver down his spine. He didn't know what these hunters were capable of, but he had a bad feeling that if they found Vena, they wouldn't just take her. They would erase any evidence that she had ever been here, including him. He took a deep breath. "All right, what do we do?" Vena stood and moved closer. "We stay quiet. We stay inside. If they don't have a precise signal, they won't rush in. They will watch first." David glanced back outside. The van hadn't moved. No one had stepped out, but he could feel the weight of unseen eyes scanning his home. Then something else happened. A streetlight flickered, then another. The air around the house grew heavier, like the oxygen had thickened. David swallowed hard, suddenly aware of his own breathing. Vena tensed. "They are testing the barrier." David turned to her. "Will it hold?" "For a while," she said, "but not forever." David's mind raced. He was just a regular guy. He wasn't a soldier or a spy. He had no weapons, no training. If these hunters broke in, what could he possibly do? Then an idea struck him. "If they don't know for sure that you're here," he said slowly, "maybe we can make them doubt." Vena's glowing eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" David pointed at the front door. "They don't want to attack unless they're sure, right? What if we make them think they're wrong?" Vena tilted her head. "Explain." David walked over to the kitchen and pulled out his laptop. Quickly, he opened an old email account and began typing. "To unknown receiver 122. Subject: Strange activity report. I saw something weird on my street. A strange black van parked outside my house. I think someone is spying on my neighbor. Maybe you should check it out." David smirked. "If they're watching, let's give them something to see." He hit send. Vena read over his shoulder. "You are alerting others." David nodded. "Not really. The email isn't going to anyone important, but if the hunters intercept it, they might think we're just a couple of paranoid humans. That could make them second-guess their target." Vena studied him for a moment, then gave a small smile. "Clever." David shrugged. "I don't have alien tech, but I know how people, or whatever they are, think." Outside, the street remained quiet. The van hadn't moved. But something felt different now. The weight in the air was slowly lifting. "They're hesitating," Vena whispered. David exhaled in relief. Maybe his plan was working. Maybe they weren't willing to take the risk of exposure. But then, a sharp electronic chirp came from the van. The door clicked open. David's stomach dropped. A tall, shadowy figure stepped out. Its movements were smooth, too smooth for a human. It was covered in something that looked like black armor, but the way it shimmered made it hard to tell if it was metal or something alive. It raised one hand. A faint red glow pulsed from its wrist. Vena grabbed David's arm. "They're scanning again." David's heart pounded. "And if they find something?" Vena met his gaze, her expression serious. "Then we fight." David had never been in a real fight before. He didn't know if he could handle an enemy like this. But as he looked at Vena, at the determination in her glowing eyes, he knew one thing. He wasn't about to let them take her. Not without a fight. David's breath came slow and steady, but his heart pounded like a drum. The shadowy figure outside stood motionless, its red scanner pulsing faintly in the night. "What is it doing?" he whispered. Vena's grip on his arm tightened. "Analyzing." The barrier is confusing them, but they are trying to break through. David swallowed. And if they succeed? Vena didn't answer. She didn't have to. The tension in her face told him enough. Outside, the figure turned its head slowly, scanning the house as if looking through the walls. Then, without a sound, it lifted its wrist again. A thin beam of red light shot forward, touching the ground. A second later, a low vibration spread through the house, making David's ears pop. "They're testing your home's structure," Vena whispered, "looking for weaknesses." David clenched his fists. "Great. Any idea how to stop them?" Vena exhaled. "I can strengthen the shield, but it will take energy. If I push too much, they will sense me directly." David considered their options. If she boosted the shield, they might stay hidden, but only for a while. If she didn't, the hunters might find a weak spot and attack. Either way, time was running out. Then he had an idea. "Wait," he said. "You said they're not sure you're here, right?" Vena nodded. David took a deep breath. "Then let's make them doubt even more." He turned away from the window and grabbed his phone. Quickly, he searched for the local police station number and dialed. Vena's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" David held up a hand for silence as the call connected. 911. "What's your emergency?" David kept his voice calm but urgent. "Hi, I live on Oak Street. There's a strange van outside my house. It's been sitting there for a while, and a guy just got out. He looks like he's scanning my house or something. It's freaking me out." The dispatcher's tone changed slightly. "Can you describe the vehicle and the person?" David glanced outside. The figure hadn't moved, but the red light on its wrist was still glowing. A black van. Windows are really dark. The guy is wearing all black, like some kind of body armor. The dispatcher sounded more alert now. "All right, sir. Stay inside. We're sending a patrol car to check it out." David hung up and turned to Vena. "Now we wait." Vena frowned. "You think human officers can stop them?" David shook his head. "No, but the hunters don't want attention, right? If cops show up, they might decide it's too risky to stay." Vena looked at him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Smart." They waited in silence. Outside, the figure still hadn't moved. The tension in the air was suffocating. Then, the red scanner blinked off. The figure turned sharply, looking towards the street. A moment later, the van's engine hummed to life. David's pulse raced. It was working. The figure moved back toward the van, stepping inside. The doors closed, and with a smooth, almost unnatural motion, the vehicle began to roll forward. David and Vena held their breath. The van passed by the house slowly, as if still trying to sense something. Then, finally, it turned the corner and disappeared into the night. David let out a shaky exhale. "Did we just?" "They left," Vena confirmed. She still looked tense, her glowing eyes locked on the window. "But not because they gave up." David's relief faded. "What do you mean?" "They're not certain I'm here," she said, "but they suspect. Your call forced them to retreat, but they will return. And next time, they will be more careful." David ran a hand through his hair. "So we just bought time." Vena nodded. "Yes, but that is better than nothing." David sighed and slumped onto the couch. His entire body felt exhausted. He had never imagined that one decision, opening his door to a stranger, would throw him into something like this. Vena sat beside him, her expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do that." David glanced at her. "I couldn't just let them take you." She studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since she arrived, she smiled, a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she said softly. David nodded. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear: this was far from over. And whatever was coming next, he would face it. Together. David barely slept that night. Even after the black van disappeared, his mind refused to settle. The thought of strange alien hunters lurking in the shadows made his skin crawl. He kept listening for any unusual sound, any sign that they had returned. But the night passed quietly. When morning arrived, golden sunlight poured through the windows, making everything feel almost normal. For a moment, David wondered if he had imagined everything. But then he turned and saw Vena. She stood near the window, watching the street carefully. Her silver skin shimmered softly in the sunlight, and her glowing blue eyes remained sharp, alert. David sighed. No, it wasn't a dream. Vena glanced at him. You didn't sleep. David rubbed his face. Hard to sleep when alien bounty hunters are after your houseguest. Vena gave a small nod, as if she understood. She turned back to the window. The hunters won't return immediately. They will wait. Observe. Plan their next move. David frowned. How do you know? Because I used to be one of them, Vena said softly. David froze. Wait. What? Vena turned to face him fully, her expression serious. I was one of them. Not a hunter, but a scientist who worked with them. I studied new species, new worlds. But one day, I learned something I wasn't supposed to know. David leaned forward. Which was? Vena hesitated. That my people were not just studying life. They were erasing it. David's stomach twisted. Erasing. Vena nodded, her voice heavy. When they find species they see as a threat, even if that threat is only potential, they do not wait. They do not take chances. They remove them. David's mouth went dry. So, wait, are you saying? Vena's eyes locked onto his. They are watching Earth. A chill ran down David's spine. Are we in danger? Vena hesitated. Not yet, but I fear that may change. That's why I ran. That's why they are after me. David took a deep breath, trying to process everything. If Vena was telling the truth, then Earth might be under some kind of alien evaluation. And if these hunters decided humanity was dangerous, what would they do? He shook his head. Okay. Let's focus on one problem at a time. What's our next move? Vena's expression became thoughtful. I need to contact someone, an ally, but I can't do it from here. Our signals are being watched. David raised an eyebrow. An ally? Another alien. Vena nodded. Yes, someone who can help us escape their tracking system. David hesitated. And where is this someone? Vena looked at him seriously. Not far. A few miles from here. David sighed. Of course. He stood up and stretched. All right. Let me grab my keys. Vena's eyes widened slightly. You're coming with me. David gave her a look. Well, yeah. I'm already involved. Plus, you don't exactly blend in around here. Vena tilted her head, then gave a small, amused smile. Fair point. A few minutes later, David pulled out his car from the garage. Vena sat in the passenger seat, wearing a hoodie he had given her to cover her glowing skin. The moment they pulled out of the driveway, David felt uneasy. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. No black van, no strange figures. Still, something felt wrong. Vena, he said quietly, how sure are you that we aren't being tracked? Vena didn't answer immediately. Then she looked at him. I'm not. David sighed. Fantastic. He gripped the steering wheel tighter and focused on the road. If they were going to do this, they had to be fast, before the hunters made their next move. The car moved steadily down the road, but David couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his chest. The morning sunlight did nothing to ease his nerves. The streets looked normal. Cars passing, people walking, life continuing, as if nothing had changed. But for David, everything had changed. Vena sat in the passenger seat, silent, her glowing eyes hidden under the shadow of the hoodie. She seemed calm, but David knew better. You're tense, he said, keeping his eyes on the road. Vena glanced at him. So are you. David sighed. Yeah, well, it's not every day I find out aliens might erase my planet. Vena didn't answer immediately. Then, in a softer voice, she said, "That is why I am here. To stop it." David nodded. He wanted to believe her. But right now, survival was more important than big questions about Earth's future. He cleared his throat. "So, this friend of yours, who is he?" Vena hesitated. "Not human." David groaned. "Yeah, I figured that much." She gave him a small, amused look before continuing. "His name is Rillo. He is not part of my species, but he owes me a favor. He has technology that can mask signals, hide our presence. If we reach him, we might have a chance." David raised an eyebrow. "Might." Vena shrugged. "Nothing is certain." David sighed again. "Fantastic." They drove for a few minutes in silence. David kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the black van behind them. Nothing. Maybe it really had shaken the hunters. Maybe. Flash. A sudden burst of light in the mirror made David's stomach drop. It wasn't headlights. It wasn't sunlight. It was red. Vena tensed. "They're here." David cursed under his breath and pressed the gas. The car lurched forward as the speedometer climbed past 60 miles per hour. He didn't have to look again. He knew what was behind them. "They're following us?" he asked. Vena nodded. "They must have placed a tracker near your house." David gritted his teeth. "How do we lose them?" Vena scanned the area. "We need to break their line of sight. If we turn into a crowded area, they won't risk attacking." David nodded. He knew just the place. Downtown. With a sharp turn, he took the nearest exit, leading toward the city center. Buildings rose ahead, streets becoming tighter, filled with cars and pedestrians. The black van followed, keeping its distance but never disappearing. David weaved through traffic, his grip tight on the wheel. "Are they planning to grab you right here in the open?" "No," Vena said, "but they might force us into a trap." David's mind raced. He had no weapons, no plan, just a car and a mission to reach Rillo. Then an idea hit him. "Vena," he said, "can you mess with their electronics?" Vena frowned. "I can, but only for a few seconds." "That's all I need." She hesitated, then nodded. "Tell me when." David gritted his teeth, waiting. The van was still behind them, waiting for an opening. Then, an intersection. David saw the light turn yellow. It was risky, but he had no choice. "Now," he shouted. Vena closed her eyes, and a faint blue glow pulsed from her fingers. For a second, the black van flickered, its headlights blinked, its engine stuttered, and David hit the gas. His car shot forward, racing through the intersection just as the light turned red. The van tried to follow. Eonk. A massive truck came from the other side, slamming its brakes as the black van skidded to a stop. David didn't look back. He just kept driving. After a few minutes, Vena exhaled. "We lost them." David let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Good. Now let's find your friend." But in the back of his mind, he knew this wasn't over. The hunters wouldn't stop. And next time, they wouldn't make the same mistake. David didn't slow down until they were deep inside the city. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his heart still pounding from the chase. The hunters had been left behind, but for how long? Vena pulled back her hood slightly, her glowing eyes scanning the streets. "Turn left here," she instructed. David followed her directions, navigating through narrow alleys and back roads. The buildings here looked old and abandoned, covered in graffiti and rusted metal. "Are you sure this is the right place?" David asked, glancing around. Vena nodded. "Rillo doesn't trust crowded areas. He stays hidden." David sighed. "Great, another paranoid alien." Finally, Vena pointed to a dark building with a broken sign hanging above the entrance. The windows were covered with metal sheets, and the door looked like it hadn't been opened in years. David parked the car and looked at her. This is it. Vena nodded. Yes. Stay close. They stepped out of the car, and David immediately felt the heavy silence around them. No people, no movement, just the distant hum of the city beyond. Vena walked up to the door and knocked 3 times. Then she paused and knocked 2 more times. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a metallic click. The door creaked open, revealing darkness inside. David tensed. Are we seriously walking into that? Vena didn't answer. She simply stepped inside. David sighed. Of course. With one last glance at the empty street, he followed her in. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud. Inside, it was dimly lit by strange, glowing panels on the walls. The air smelled of metal and something else David couldn't place. Then, a voice echoed through the room. You're late, Vena. David turned quickly, his muscles tensing. A figure emerged from the shadows. A tall, thin being with smooth greenish-gray skin and glowing yellow eyes. His head was slightly elongated, and small mechanical implants ran along his arms. David took a step back. I'm guessing you're Rilo. The alien smirked. And you must be the human. Brave of you to get involved in this mess. David crossed his arms. Yeah, well, I didn't exactly have a choice. Rilo turned to Vena. Why did you bring him here? Vena's expression was calm. He helped me. I trust him. Rilo raised an eyebrow. Trust? That's dangerous. David rolled his eyes. Look, I didn't come here for a lecture. Vena said you could help. Rilo studied him for a moment before sighing. Yes, I have something that can block the hunter's trackers. But it won't last forever. He walked over to a cluttered table filled with strange devices and picked up a small metallic disc. He handed it to Vena. This will mask your signal for a few days. After that, they will find you again. David frowned. So what's the long-term plan? Rilo's expression darkened. There is none. The hunters will never stop. They always find their target. David clenched his fists. Then we need to stop them first. Rilo let out a dry laugh. You think you can fight them? They are highly trained. They have technology far beyond what you can imagine. David looked at Vena. But you know how they operate, right? Their weaknesses. Vena hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I do. David turned back to Rilo. Then we do have a chance. Rilo studied him, then shook his head with a small smile. Humans, always so stubborn. He sighed. Fine, I'll help you. But if this goes wrong, we're all dead. David smirked. Then we better make sure it doesn't go wrong. Vena placed the metallic disc on her arm, and a soft blue light pulsed from it. For now, they were safe. But the real fight was only just beginning. David leaned against the cold metal table, staring at the strange devices scattered across Rilo's workshop. His mind raced with thoughts of what was coming. The hunters wouldn't stop. They had tried to capture Vena before, and now that they knew she had help, they would come back even stronger. Rilo tapped on a glowing screen, his yellow eyes scanning the data. They haven't found us yet, but they will. The masking device is working, but it won't last forever. David sighed. So what's the plan? We can't just keep running. Vena stepped forward. We need to disable their tracking system completely. If we don't, they'll keep finding us no matter where we go. David frowned. And how do we do that? Rilo turned to them. Their main relay is in an orbiting stealth ship. That's where they monitor and track targets. If we destroy it, they'll lose sight of you, at least for a long time. David raised an eyebrow. And how do we destroy a spaceship? You got a missile hidden somewhere. Rilo smirked. Something better. He walked to a locked cabinet and pressed his palm against a scanner. With a click, the door opened, revealing a small spherical device. David stared at it. What is that? Rilo picked it up carefully. An EMP charge. It won't destroy the ship, but it will fry their tracking systems and most of their tech. They'll be blind for a while. David nodded slowly. Okay, sounds good, but how do we get it onto their ship? Vena's expression hardened. We let them take me. David's stomach twisted. Wait, what? No, that's insane. Vena shook her head. It's the only way. If they think they've captured me, they'll take me straight to the ship. I can place the EMP inside, activate it, and disable them from the inside. David ran a hand through his hair. Yeah. And what happens after that? How do you escape? Vena hesitated, then looked at Rillo. Rillo sighed. I have a teleportation device. Short range. Once the EMP goes off, I can pull her out, if she's in range. David narrowed his eyes. And if she's not? Rillo didn't answer. David turned to Vena. This is too risky. Vena stepped closer, her glowing blue eyes meeting his. It's the only way, David. If we don't do this, they'll never stop, and Earth will be in danger. David clenched his fists. He hated this. Every part of him wanted to find another way. But deep down, he knew Vena was right. He took a deep breath. Fine. But if anything goes wrong, we pull you out immediately. No hero moves. Vena gave him a small smile. Agreed. Rillo set the EMP on the table. We don't have much time. We need to prepare. David exhaled and nodded. The final battle was coming, and they had one shot to get it right. David stood in the dark alley, his heart pounding like a drum. The plan was simple, but deadly. Let the hunters capture Vena, sneak the EMP onto their ship, and shut them down. But David hated this plan. He adjusted the small earpiece Rillo had given him. Are you sure this will work? He whispered. Rillo's voice crackled through the earpiece. No, but it's the best shot we have. David clenched his fists. Great, just great. Vena stood beside him, her glowing blue eyes calm, focused. She had pulled her hood down, making herself an easy target. You don't have to do this, David muttered. Vena gave him a small smile. Yes, I do. You saved me, David. Now, I save you. Before he could argue, they arrived. A sudden hum filled the air. A dark hovercraft descended from the sky, its sleek black surface reflecting the city lights. David tensed. This was it. The side of the craft slid open, and 3 armored figures stepped out. Their helmets hid their faces, but David could feel their presence. Cold, precise, dangerous. One of them pointed at Vena. You have nowhere left to run. Come quietly. Vena lifted her hands in surrender, taking slow steps forward. David felt his muscles tighten. Every instinct screamed at him to stop her. But he couldn't. This was the plan. The hunters grabbed her, securing metallic cuffs around her wrists. As they led her toward the hovercraft, she turned ever so slightly, her fingers brushing against her sleeve. David saw the movement. The EMP was in place. She gave him one last glance before stepping inside. The doors slid shut. The hovercraft lifted off. And just like that, she was gone. David paced inside Rillo's hideout, his jaw clenched. How long until we activate the EMP? Rillo was typing furiously on his console. We wait until she's aboard the ship. If we do it too soon, the mission fails. David exhaled sharply. Waiting was the worst part. Seconds felt like hours. Then, Rillo's screen flashed. She's in, Rillo said. Activating now. He pressed a button. A faint pulse of energy rippled through the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, boom! A distant explosion echoed through the sky. A fireball erupted above the city, followed by flickering lights. David's eyes widened. Did it work? Rillo scanned the screen. Systems fried. The ship is disabled. David's heart dropped. And Vena. Rillo's fingers flew over the keyboard. trying to lock onto her signal. Wait, I see her. The screen flashed red. David felt cold. What happened? Relo cursed. She's out of range. David's hands clenched into fists. No, no, we have to get her back. I'm trying. Relo snapped, adjusting controls. She must be inside a shielded area. I need more time. David's mind raced. There had to be another way. Then, an idea. The ship is disabled, right? David asked. Yes, but... Then take me there, David interrupted. I'll get her myself. Relo hesitated. That's suicide. David's voice was firm. I don't care. Relo stared at him for a moment, then sighed. You humans, always reckless. He pressed a few keys. A small hovering drone rose from the floor, large enough to carry one person. This will get you to the ship, Relo said. But once you're in, you're on your own. David didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the drone, gripping the controls. Hold on, Relo muttered, launching in 3, 2, 1. Whoosh. The drone shot upward, carrying David into the night sky. Inside the hunter's ship, Vena struggled against the restraints holding her to the wall. The EMP had done its job, but she was trapped inside a secured chamber. She took a slow breath. At least David was safe. Then, bang. The door burst open. Vena's eyes widened as David stumbled inside, blaster in hand. You? She whispered, shocked. David smirked. Did you really think I'd leave you? Before she could answer, an alarm blared. The hunters weren't finished yet. Come on, David said, breaking her restraints. Let's get out of here. They sprinted through the flickering halls, dodging sparks and fallen debris. The ship was dying, and they had seconds to escape. Hold on. David grabbed Vena's hand and jumped toward an open hatch. Whoosh! Relo's drone appeared just in time, catching them as the ship erupted behind them. The force sent them spinning through the sky, but the drone adjusted, stabilizing their fall. David and Vena collapsed onto the platform, breathing heavily. For a moment, there was silence. Then Vena turned to David. You came back for me. David chuckled. Of course. You still owe me a favor, remember? Vena smiled. Rilo's voice crackled through their earpieces. You two better hold on. I'm bringing you back. The drone changed direction, heading toward the city below. The hunter's ship was destroyed. Their tracking system was down. And for the first time, Vena was truly free. David looked at her and smiled. Welcome to Earth. The end.